What's up, artists? Welcome to another episode of the Spiritual Psychiatrist Podcast. It's a joy, a pleasure, and an honor to have on the episode today what I consider to be one of the most brilliant mathematical minds on the planet. And whenever you meet one of these, but the thing is, he not only has the mind, he's got the heart. And I can testify to this in person because I've met him. So he's integrated the empathy, he's integrated the business mind, he's integrated the math into his frequency. And so it's an absolute honor and a joy. And, you know, he's lived a lot of lifetimes. So I'm really excited to kind of delve into, in one lifetime, he's lived a lot of lifetimes.
Thank you, Sam.
So, you know, I'm excited to delve into that. And some of you guys might see him, you know, he's been knighted. He's a successful businessman, but most importantly, he has an amazing heart, and he just he leads groups to Egypt, right? And so he's his contribution to humanity is eclectic and multidimensional and mathematical. So it's an absolute joy and a pleasure and an honor to have on the show today, Sir. I'm adding the Sir because he has been knighted. Mm-hmm. He has been knighted, right, for his contribution to humanity. And that's going to just continue. So that's what I'm most excited about. And so thanks for taking the time, Sir.
Thank you, my friend. So good to see you. I remember first time meeting you and then breaking into Korean language, which was pretty epic that you speak it so fluently too. So many people that weren't born in Korea don't really get a chance to speak much Korean. And I don't get a chance to practice it much, but I did live there for a couple of years and I loved it. And what a brilliant doctor you are, and doing such a great service for humanity, taking people into learning themselves. And I think that's really your gift that you're bringing to so many people. And for that, I'm very grateful too.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I received that. And, you know, I've heard a lot of Caucasian people attempt to speak Korean. I got to say, your accent was actually pretty phenomenal. I could literally understand you, and I was like, "Wow, okay." So that you know, out of all the Caucasian people I've heard try to speak Korean, you were probably one of the best.
Well, thank you very much. I lived there. It's been, gosh, let's see, it was the late '80s, so that's been a long time now, right? Mm-hmm. For me, I was there at '88 to '90. And I don't get to speak Korean that much, except for when I go to the dry cleaner. And, you know, they're the nicest people. And every year I get the apple pears and everything from them. And so every time I go there, I speak to them in Korean, or when I go to my favorite restaurants. But I do go for business pretty often, too. I have partnerships with several Korean companies. One was Samsung, another is Daewoo Pharmaceuticals. And so I do get to use Korean, I guess, from time to time, but not as much as I'd like. And definitely I love Korean food. Kimchi is epic.
Yo, I'm happy to hear that, because, you know, that means you're doing something good. And I'm going to be honest with you. If they give you the pears and the fruit from the dry cleaner, not everybody gets that.
Not everybody gets that. Okay. No, I definitely get special treatment there.
You know what I mean?
That's right. The top 1%.
That's true. That's the truth. Because, you know, I know a lot of my friends' parents were those owners, right? They don't give that to everybody, especially.
Well, it's so crazy, because even my favorite dry cleaner in Laguna Beach that I've been going to for 20 plus years, they had two daughters that both went to med school at Tufts. I think one went to Brigham and Women's and the other went to Tufts. But anyway, it was they're both super, super smart kids. And their parents worked their whole lives and made a very successful business so their kids could go on to do that. And it sounds like, I mean, you went to NYU, didn't you?
No. I went
Which med school did you go to?
Loma Linda University.
Loma Linda. Okay. Yeah. So just inland. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a great school. I've been out there and met with the leadership of the school, the CEO and president. Took me on a tour one day, and it's fascinating. Dental school and the med schools are excellent.
And so I want to start here, because every time I talk to you, Robert, I'm blown away by, you're connected to Korea, you're connected to Loma Linda, you're connected to Botox. You know, I did my residency in Cedars-Sinai, and it seems like you've
Cedars-Sinai, okay. Mm-hmm.
You literally lived 20 lifetimes in this lifetime. And I'm a firm believer that every single thing, not only in this lifetime, but in the previous ones, is your higher self allows you to experience something to prepare you for what's to come. And so I'm very curious if you could walk us through your hero's journey, some of the key
Sure.
points of what you've done in this lifetime that has prepared you for what's about to come.
You know, I think it's fascinating that the universe somehow throws us into experiences that become increasingly ridiculous.
Mhm.
And it's almost like the increasing ridiculousness wakes us up out of the slumber.
Mm,
Because at some point I turned around and I was like, my life just doesn't seem very normal. Like it kept having strange twists and turns from the time I was 13 years old and I had IgA nephropathy, which is a
mm,
rare kidney disorder that was an autoimmune thing that was triggered by post-glomerular streptococcal, it was as post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. And I almost like had to have 5 kidney transplants. They were going to do kidney transplants for me endlessly because of this autoimmune disorder. And somehow I woke up one morning and decided I'm not going to be sick anymore.
mm,
So, and then I talked to my friends. I'm like, did something like that happen in your childhood where, you were on like this vigil and everyone praying for you and everything? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay. So I just kind of chalked that up to not a big deal. And then when I was in my mid 20s, I was in my first plane crash that I
mm,
survived,
mm.
which was like,
Yeah.
wait a minute. I was flying back from Singapore. We refueled in Alaska. We flew from Alaska to LA, and then the landing gear didn't come down.
Mm,
And it was Delta Flight 88. It was an MD-11 and no landing gear in the front. So we had to belly flop on the runway in LAX, which was
well,
a lot of fire and a lot of screaming. And
mm,
I walked out of that plane. I slid down the yellow,
mm,
chutes. And I
yeah,
remember looking back up at the plane and going, what how the heck did I survive this? I'm like 23 years old at the time.
yeah.
And I started noticing that I had these increasingly bizarre experiences. And my career was on this strange track as well. So, people would say, well, how did you go after your career? And I said, well, when everyone was running out of a theater, I
Mhm,
would be the guy running in with the water if it's on fire.
mm,
And that's the way I looked at my career as well. So the most risky jobs that
mm,
nobody wanted, everyone thought was the worst tour of duty to take. Sometimes they were overseas. I lived in 9 different countries. I learned 8 languages in the process. And I took the riskiest jobs, but somehow I would always end up in some lucky circumstance. And
mm,
there was like some disaster, and the disaster catapulted me to the next stage of my career.
mm,
Always.
mm,
And in the most difficult of circumstances, I think we find in ourselves either the ability to focus or we fold.
mm,
Like when you're in a tough spot and you don't know what's going to happen next, a lot of people would just fold, give
mm,
up, and kind of go home and take their toys with them. In
mm,
my case, I was like, okay, maybe if I can focus instead of fold and not be afraid, there's some advantage or benefit that could come out of this difficult circumstance.
mm,
And that happened even when I lived in Tokyo, Japan. I was country manager for a pacemaker company,
mm.
and the pacemaker company was called Telectronics,
Yeah.
and it was part of. And I was the general manager, and I was like 25 years old at the time.
Mm,
And I'm living in Tokyo, Japan. I speak Japanese, and next thing I know, that one of the pacemakers that the company had bought through an acquisition more than 15 years before was having a catastrophic failure.
mm,
And the pacemaker has a wire that goes in through the superior vena cava, right, and into the atrial node of the heart. So I was a
mhm,
cardiac tech. At
mhm,
one point in my career, I was a cardiac tech. Can you believe this?
mhm,
And so this pacemaker lead would go into the top of your heart, and it had a memory wire to hold the atrial node, right? So there's the anode and cathode,
mhm.
right? At the apex of the at the sinoatrial node of the heart.
Yeah.
And after it would be in the heart for 10 years, there was this little wire inside. It'd be like taking your credit card and going like this with it 40 million times a year.
Mm,
If I do this with my credit card 40 million times a year,
yeah.
what's going to happen to it? Eventually, it's going to get a stress fracture. If I just go like this with my credit card, it'll get a stress fracture. It'll break. Well, this wire was 1 millimeter in
Mhm,
diameter,
mhm,
and it would cut through the polyurethane sheath or the silicone sheath that housed it. And then it would basically cut through the aorta and cause cardiac tamponade.
Damn.
So here I was. These products were not even products we ever sold. We just acquired the company through an acquisition. So now I'm the country manager in Japan, and I'm having to exhume 2,000 bodies and do autopsies on people that have been dead for 10 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
this is what I mean by the ridiculousness of it. Next thing I know, I'm literally on Japanese television searching for patients so that we can find everybody that might have these pacemaker leads. I'm 25 years old,
Okay.
and it's a huge national issue. It's like front page news every day. And the word for pacemaker in Japanese is shinzo pacemaker, right? Which is shinzo is like the word for heart in Japanese.
Yeah.
So as I went through this, that crisis circumstance led to my career advancing very rapidly because everyone else was folding. I stayed focused, and then I would get promoted because I could handle the crisis. And from my perspective, I'd already survived a plane crash. What's to lose?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just kept doing that over and over and over again, and I got good at that. And so I found myself in the most challenging of circumstances, and then the worst case scenario was not ever so worst case. So I learned something through all of this. And I learned that I had my own resiliency within, and that I was the master of my fate and the captain of my soul, not somebody else. And I realized that all these things that we get afraid of in the world were paper tigers. They weren't even real. It was the fear that made it real. What happens to us in life is not actually what happens to us. It's what we believe happens to us. So if we could change the way we react to things by changing our belief system of what occurs, you are more than half the way there towards living the life of your dreams. And so that's what happened. I ended up getting promoted. I kept finding myself in turnarounds where situations seemed dire and impossible to overcome. And I would run into those circumstances, and then somehow when everyone else was running out, I would be the one left over when the tide turned the other direction. And that was the series of my life over and over and over again. Next thing you know, and even when I was 20, in my early 20s, I had visions of my future life. Like I knew that one day I was going to lead the medical aesthetics industry. Botox wasn't even around really then. I mean, it existed. It's a naturally occurring protein as a toxin, but I knew one day I was going to be a leader in the medical aesthetics industry, and I was. And the areas of healthcare that I spent most of my time in were 3 areas, and they're interesting from a philosophical perspective. One was medical aesthetics, learning proportion and line and symmetry and being in that world of the beauty business, right? And the medicine side of beauty. And the other 2 areas that I spent most of my time in were ophthalmology, the eye, the I am, and the heart, cardiology. So those were the major areas I spent my time in. And now when I look back on all this, and so I became an expert in the anatomy of the eye. I became an expert in the anatomy of the heart. I became an expert in all of the ways to beautify or create an aesthetic appeal, almost to the point where plastic surgeons believe that they're there to correct things that God didn't do right. So these were all areas that, quite frankly, had a profound impact on my spiritual awakening when I finally got there. And you can't see how all the dots in your life connect until you can see them in the retrospect. But we're literally living a movie that has already been made, and we're watching it play in reverse, and we think reverse is forward time. Everything happens for a reason. Nothing is left to chance. We have a higher self that has decided to experience itself through our unique eyes of vision by creating a dimensionally limited avatar, a meat suit that we live in. And if we're going to make a spiritual life simulation game, it would never make sense to have your avatar have all the same powers you have of omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence. It would only make sense to dimensionally limit that avatar and take away all of those abilities and powers, because otherwise it'd be no fun.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be like, kind of like, okay, we're playing poker, but I could see all your cards. Or I could see the future, so I know what the hand you're gonna play is, or the hand you're gonna be dealt. Not really a fun game.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're omniscient, omnipresent, and you are God, and we all are,
Uh-huh.
then you realize that the only game that would ever make sense is to limit your powers, and then have this dimensionally limited avatar find itself and remember who it is, and realize its own God realization through a series of challenges and tests, which challenges and tests we call life. And the ultimate goal is to remember who we are and learn how to love and how to be loved.
Uh-huh.
So my career experience has been like that. And it took me to keep looking at my life and say, this is so weird. How can it be that I'm doing all this stuff? It doesn't seem real. And when I realized the only thing real in this world of mind matrix is the emotions that we feel. The rest is just stimulation. It's just an input stimuli that then we derive through our perception, which is only derivable through our observation biases and our own confirmation biases, that we then experience the world around us. And that then creates emotion, which emotional states will be different. We could have the same thing happen to you and I in life, and each of us could have entirely different perspectives on what happened. We're unique, and that's why we're here. We allow the universe, the one divides itself in the many, so that it can perceive itself through our unique eyes of individuation.
So I'm hearing you. Ridiculousness over and over and over again. Kidney nephropathy, IgA, into all of a sudden you're on TV in Japan, but you have this quality, which is you turn these chaos and your ability to focus, and you can find the edge when other people run. You come into it, and this quality over and over again, the more ridiculous it got, you slowly started connecting the pictures, and this led you into the medical aesthetics, and part creator of the Botox industry, and every single thing was leading you. And you're saying that these things were preparing you for your spiritual awakening. Can you take us, Robert, into your spiritual awakening, if and when that happened?
Sure.
How that's going?
It started, I would say, probably as far back as 2008. And I remember I was in a line on the way to Cabo. And I was at the airport, and I was standing at the Starbucks, and there was a very famous woman standing next to me. And her name was Lauren Conrad. So Lauren Conrad was from the TV show The Hills, and she was also in Laguna Beach. Right? And she was like all over the media then and everything. And I was standing in line, and I was reading the book The Secret, because it was kind of a big thing back then in 2008, right? And she turned back to me, she goes, "Is that book good?" Because she's Lauren Conrad. Like, I wasn't going to be like fawning over, like, oh my gosh, you're like famous and all this stuff, and you're on the show. It's a reality TV show. And reality TV show was still relatively new at the time, like that type or genre. And so we struck up a conversation, and turns out she was going to the same hotel I was in the Esperanza Resort in Cabo. And she was there with her family. They lived in Laguna Beach. I lived in Laguna Beach. So we took a car there together, right? So I had a car service, and they hadn't booked a car yet. So I just said, come with me, right? And I was going to a golf retreat for plastic surgeons, right? At Esperanza. So we talked a lot about this book, The Secret. And then that led to me watching, and I spent some time with them, and they were super nice and everything, got to know that family. But then I ended up going somewhere else, and I gave a speech in Miami. I think it was at Baskin Palmer, which is an ophthalmology group. And this is now 2010. And the woman that was like organizing the conference said, "Have you seen this movie, What the Bleep Do We Know?" And I said, "No, I've never heard of it." "What do you mean? What the bleep do we know? Follow the rabbit down the white rabbit down the rabbit hole?" I'm like, what a weird title.
Sure.
And she's like, "Oh, there's this guy named Joe Dispenza in here, and you know, there's Bob Proctor and all these other guys." And she's like, "The same people that made the book The Secret." And I was like, "Some of the same people." And I was
Mm,
like, "Oh, okay. Well, I read The Secret, and I had always believed that gratitude was the key to life success.
mm,
Because what I'd learned through all my experiences of dealing with crises and
mm,
fear was that I could overcome these feelings of fear that can often take over
mm,
by simply going to a place in a state of gratitude. And I realized that it was physically impossible for me to feel fear and gratitude at the same time.
mm,
So if I could bombard my senses with the feeling of gratitude, then the fear just dissipated.
mm,
And that's how I didn't fold and rather focused
mm,
during the most difficult of circumstances that would arise in my career at young ages. And so I ended up watching What the Bleep Do We Know and got really deep into understanding the double slit phenomenon and quantum physics and all of this. And I was like, what the heck? You know, wait a minute. So what we perceive as a particle could have also been a wave before we observed it. Does this mean that there's no local realism? And that's exactly what it does mean, in fact, because, and a Nobel Prize was just given in 2022, basically proving on the cover of the Scientific American,
mm,
it says local realism is false, and this year's Nobel Prize winners proved it.
mm.
So when I say local realism, and I don't know if you know who Donald Hoffman is.
No.
Donald Hoffman is a cognitive neuroscientist at UCI, who
Mm,
I've done a podcast with. He's a great guy. And he's probably the preeminent authority on the mathematical mapping of human consciousness.
mm,
So he read my book. He came to spend a day with me in my office,
mhm,
and with one of his mathematicians, Dr. Salhotra, who's a
mm,
PhD mathematician as well. And they, you know, came and spent time with me, and they said, look, we'd really like to understand how to mathematically equate human emotions. Is there a way that you believe that you could ascribe human emotions to
mm,
mathematics?
mm,
So I've spent a lot of time with him. He basically said, he's like, look, you know, local realism means that if you're not observing something,
mhm,
it doesn't hold a position.
mm,
If it doesn't hold a position, it's not there.
mm,
That means if no one's observing the moon
mm,
until it's observed, it's like I have these goggles right here that are
mm,
my Apple Vision Pro goggles that are
mhm.
pretty cool.
You
If
like
you
them?
haven't,
I've
I
never
have them right here. Yeah,
seen
they're
it.
awesome. Yeah, they're awesome.
Cool.
I don't use it that much, but I use it for the rendering of King's Chamber, the Great Pyramid, and everything. So you can actually do a tour inside the Great Pyramid. We've actually created the whole thing
Sick.
in here. So if I put on these goggles, right, you start to think about a universal principle. Okay, so this is so hyper realistic. When you put them on,
Mm,
you realize immediately we're in a matrix
mm,
because in a few years, we won't be able to distinguish reality.
mm.
It's that real. The 8K display, unbelievable.
Wow.
But when you start to think about this,
Mhm,
how could the universe, using the conservation of energy,
mm,
be able to have all of the diversification that we have in the universe and be able to conduct
mm,
all that computation? Well, the
mm,
way it does it is just like these goggles do.
mm,
It only renders what you're observing.
mm,
So all the stuff behind me doesn't exist until I look at it in these goggles. It's the same thing.
mhm,
So here we are living this life where we are only having to render computationally, right, through our observation, the
mhm,
things that we observe the moment we observe it. And the speed that it takes for us to have that rendering
mm,
is what we call the speed of light.
mm,
Maybe it's more correctly and appropriately called the speed of our perception. We're in a mind matrix. And as such, it is all built on our beliefs.
mm,
So our own hero's journey, every one of us has a hero's journey. And so, you know, after I met you, I ended up having this big kind of like, for lack of better term, stream of consciousness download.
mm.
And and I've not done this on other podcasts, so this is kind of a first here. I wrote down 24 precepts of universal mind.
Hmm.
The universe is mental. Number one, realize that you live in a you inverse of your own creation as an interconceived notional experience and chosen soul journey for a dimensionally limited avatar self, thoroughly designed by your multidimensional and omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent higher self. Number two, your conscious awareness informs your mirror separation of conscious, which is your persona or mask, and unconscious mind experience, which I call the you inverse. You are the playwright, director, producer, and the actor on your life stage play, and all the world is a stage. Your higher self has chosen for you to participate in a multiplayer spiritual life simulation, a game in which the participant is a dimensionally limited avatar. The purpose of the game construct is to expand awareness of yourself by dividing awareness into both conscious and unconscious minds, uniquely allowing the one source creator to divide itself into the many for the experience of observing itself through greater and greater variation of angular degrees of perception and unique conditioning biases, both nature and nurture in their orientation. Number three, ultimately, this multifunctional experience enables increasing empathy and wisdom experienced by the higher self for infinite circumstances and scenarios, thus increasing the knowledge database of space-time memory, the cumulative collection of all biased observational emotional responses of all divisions of source creation. In this construct, you'll be born with the self-bias as a hero.
Hmm.
From the moment awareness crystallizes into your persona hero bias through a series of experiences introducing shame, blame, and vulnerability as uncomfortable and undesirable perceptions that ultimately mold and shape your self-identity, which is your reflected awareness of persona, as well as your absorbed villain characteristics formed as a direct result of the hero identity affiliation. So in this context, every one of us identifies ourselves as heroes, even the villains. And that's the thing. Ultimately, there's no hero and there's no villain.
Yeah.
The hero believes that it needs a villain so that it knows its own identity. The backdrop, number 4, of the spiritual life simulation is duality. The experience introducing judgment resulting in the suffering as a result of scarcity of time, energy, and resources, enmity, power, and while introducing an illusory concept of the eternal battle between reflected light and its absorbed darkness, and the perception that devolution is the tendency of energetic bias that we call entropy. In this construct, every hero will reflexively consider their opposers as villains. Likewise, even villains consider themselves heroes. The self-concept of hero and villain alike are merely degrees of imbalance and derive from both the hero's and the villain's inability to perceive dark aspects within themselves and within their shadows, subconscious, and instead severely repress these hidden aspects, assigning these characteristics to their villain counterpart, as both will inevitably perceive the other as a villain, when in fact both are neither, or both in fact, both and neither are either heroes or villains, but rather unintegrated personalities capable of both dark judgments and therefore dark actions, justifying their means by the end results, and the motive behind such actions is exclusively self-interest disguised as collective need and benefit. All avatars are imbued with both talents and powers as well as seeming character flaws, which flaws make the gameplay more realistic. The aim of the game is to transcend duality. Remember and tap into the higher consciousness, integrate the shadow awareness, and attain the philosopher's stone of hemisynchronization of heart-brain consciousness, thus merging the conscious and unconscious minds into one whole, the superconscious mind. So this is the world we're living in.
Yeah, Robert, you just broke down the entire, I mean, this could be kind of like a new guidebook for someone who comes to Earth, the rules of the game. When you come in, this is what you're born with, and in this limited dimensionalized avatar, it's only real if you focus on it. And then you also just kind of spelled out the rules of the game of duality, the hero and the villain, but there's actually no hero and villain where it's all a mirror. And so you just pretty much laid out the entire rules of the Matrix game, and the whole goal of all of this, if you want to say, is to integrate the shadow and consecrate the shadow into what it is. We have the capability for both of them, and so everything becomes one, and you retain that omniscience, omnipotence, all of those things which are naturally are. And we did this on purpose because source
Yeah.
to experience itself in many different ways. Now, a lot of people, you know, how can I say? I think you've done an amazing job of integrating the dark and the light, and this is one quality that I really admire in you. When I met you the first time, you were able to see that everything is a miracle.
Yeah.
You know, and you were not only were you saying it, but like the synchronicities, because you believe that, as you mentioned, the belief system is the perception, was actually starting to happen in your life, and you're like within like 5 minutes there was already so many synchronicities happening. What advice do you have? It's an interesting time for humanity right now, individually, collectively, dark and light, hero and villain. You know, how are you able to integrate so well into your being? And then what kind of advice do you have for the individual and humanity at this time?
You know, I think the key to coming here is to realize that source consciousness is as much dark as light.
Hmm.
It's not like God is the universe and in this constant battle between light and darkness. It's both. Godliness and divinity is finding the balance between the two and recognizing that they exist and allowing them to cohabitate, to coexist with each other.
Hmm.
That one cannot exist without the other. You can't have light without darkness. And people often say, what do you mean, Robert, when you say that darkness is not the absence of light, it's rather its opposite condition?
Hmm.
Well, what I mean by that is exactly what I just said. I mean, if you look at a color spectrum,
Hmm.
then you'd realize that the dark colors on the color spectrum have absorbed colors that are the opposite color on the color wheel.
Hmm.
So my carpet here is tan, but its opposite color is kind of like a bluish gray color.
Hmm.
And it's both colors. It's
Hmm.
not only the reflection, it's also the absorbed. I'm just not able to perceive the absorbed color,
Hmm.
but it's there.
Hmm.
And if you look at a spectral analysis of it, I would see all the lines of the tan color in its reflection. But if I looked at its absorbed spectral analysis, I would see all of its opposite colors, all the
Hmm.
ones that those are not those tan colors.
Hmm.
So this is exactly, it's like what we look at when we look at like negative film,
Hmm.
right? You have a white backdrop that then becomes a black backdrop.
Hmm.
It's not that one is evil and one is good. It's just your point of perspective. And what we all get trapped into is to realize, and we start to believe that the facts that we learn and accumulate through our life, because we think the game, the illusion of the game is that we're here to learn more judgment. The illusion of the game is that we're here to be better discerners and for the light to fight the dark. But I said there's already a hero bias. So you've got people like Hitler who believed he was a hero.
Hmm.
He was doing a great service for humanity to get rid of the Jewish population in his mind. So this is what happens is I'm not so worried about the people that have darkness within them because everyone does. I get more concerned about the people that believe they have no darkness within them
Hmm.
because that's the ones that they will do anything to justify. The end will always justify their means. And this is where you have the shepherd who looks on the hillside where there's more shade and says, oh, the sun's been tough on my herd of sheep because, you know, I'm right in the direct sunlight and I don't have any shade. And the other guy across has a greener valley. Well, what a coincidence. Last night I had a dream and my God appeared to me and told me that I should kill him and consecrate his land to my God.
Yeah.
And this is what happens all the time.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's this concept of genocide.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter. It's like, oh, they're evil. If we can make them evil, then really, you know, we are justifying our actions, even what we would call the hero's actions, by saying it's for the greater good. We disguise our self-interest for a greater good concept, and we're not aware of it. We can't see it. The reason we can't see it is because the knife can't cut itself. An eye can't see itself without the aid of a mirror. A
Hmm.
tooth can't bite itself.
Yeah.
A light cannot illumine itself. So consciousness is the same. We have to separate to perceive ourselves. So for the one source creator to perceive itself and become more wise and to learn empathy for all possible circumstances and scenarios, it divides itself so that it can perceive itself. And each of our emotional states that are derived from these perceptions become this Akashic field of information. Information, which then is like a super, I don't like the term artificial because I think all intelligence is intelligent, but intelligence.
Mm.
So the way that I started to realize this is I used to collect facts all the time.
Mhm.
And one day I realized that maybe what I'd been collecting as facts wasn't fact at all,
Mm.
but rather a facet of a larger truth,
Mm.
a facet of a larger prism of truth that I hadn't previously been aware of. Because the illusion of my own conditioning biases didn't allow my tooth to bite itself, didn't allow me to perceive my own self-interest. So when I started to actually step outside of that perspective, then the whole world expanded.
Mm.
And then I could start to see, wait a minute, maybe I was only looking at one facet. And it's funny because in mathematics, I think of the number, the Euler number, which is signified by E. And most people don't know what the E actually stands for, but Euler was a fellow by the name of Leonard Euler, a mathematician who came up with, probably arguably equal in importance to pi, because where pi makes circles, Euler creates squares.
Mm.
And you could say that it's the control of all compound interest growth and wave propagation in the universe. So if the speed of light is the governor or the speed limit of the universe, then the speed limit of that speed limit has to be Euler. Euler has to be at the basis because it controls all wave propagation growth.
Mm.
And that the value of it is 2.718. Well, most people don't know that there's a pneumatic to remember this. And the pneumatic is the name Euler itself, because it wasn't even Leonard Euler who discovered this number. You could say it was maybe Jacob Bernoulli, maybe it was Napier, maybe it was Isaac Newton. All have claim to this. I would argue that Da Vinci knew it hundreds of years before all of them.
Yeah.
He embedded it. His square had an area of the Euler number, and his circle in Vitruvian Man had an area of pi.
Mm.
That's interesting. So an easy way to think of it would be an equilateral triangle with each side as pi. The height will be the Euler number.
Mm.
Now, what's fascinating about this, though, is the name Euler has other significance, because an owl has a unique characteristic. The owl has the ability, we're not born with eyes in the back of our head. Do you have eyes in the back of your head? No. Right? We can't see ourselves. It's like the eye not being able to see itself. So the owl is a representation of wisdom. Why? Because it has this unique characteristic that it can spin its head all the way around. It's not limited by like us, we've got about maybe 180 degrees, right, of being able to move our head. But an owl can actually move its head all the way around to 271.8 degrees. That's the Euler number. 2.718.
Yeah.
And pi is 3.14. So Euler in German means oil is the word for owl. So the E added to the word fact is like the owl. The context of the wisdom of the owl, being able to see more degrees of perception of the self. And this knowledge means that you can start to expand your awareness of who you are by stepping outside of yourself. This expanded view on you allows you to be able to realize your own God consciousness. Because we can look at the world and lots of people believe that, okay, the universe is divine. If you get past some notion that some people think, well, God is only light, it can't be darkness. But wait, isn't death also life? Yeah. Isn't darkness also light? Yeah. It's just the opposite condition of it, right? It's not the absence of it.
Yeah.
And so when you start to think in those terms, then you start realizing, well, wait a minute. This means then that I am living in this U inverse of my perception. What is inside of me is reflected to my outer world.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm living in, creating this great paradox, because we think we're in this separate world and we're like trying to defeat the villain, right? Identify the villain and then defeat the villain.
Mhm.
The problem is the more we live that life, the more we create more villain. We don't even realize it.
Oh,
In
really?
this U inverse of our perception,
Mhm.
we will attract everything we judge until we no longer judge everything we attract.
Oh.
So what we are here to do is to learn how to fall in love with it all.
Mm.
And when we do, then our entire world changes. See, what you're doing is you're like a purveyor. That's how I see you. It's funny because I've talked about you to lots of people now. And it was really interesting because I was shocked how many people we know in common, which was like really hilarious. Because I was talking to Adil at Unify.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, "So who are you with?" I'm like Sam Lee. He's like, "My boy." I was like totally laughing.
A deal, yeah.
Yeah, and I had that same kind of conversation with probably another 15 people.
Hmm.
No joke, that we've known so many people, and you had known Nassim and everything as well, and his whole crew, and of course I've been closely associated. And I reached out to Nassim after
That's
I
right.
met up with you, and so we're going to meet up again.
Hmm.
But this concept of the hero and villain and the codependency that they have on each other in order to define their own self-perception and their self-identification. In short, the villain begins where the hero ends and vice versa. This is the world we're living in. We live in a U inverse, and then we want to judge it all. But the funny paradox of all of it is that the journey outside of us into this outer world is actually a journey within us, because it's all a reflection of what's happening within. So when we learn to fall in love with the world around us, we're really learning to fall in love with ourselves and learn to accept ourselves. And as we do that, then our entire reality shifts.
Yeah, Robert, I'm resonating on all fronts. And, you literally just explained in mathematics and formulation, so many different avenues I want to go into right now, but as within, so without, the DNA is projecting the hologram, you learn how to love someone else. You're actually learning how to go love yourself. It's all, and then the hero and villain merge into one. And then the miracle, it's just all God all around you all the time. And so I think this might be a good bridge to delve into. As within, so without, as below, so above. You explained that brilliantly through the prisms of the Brown there. But I know you spent a lot of time in Egypt, and you've actually spent time in the King's Chamber, probably more than I don't know, anyone I've ever met. And so these hermetic.
I just spent one more night in the King's Chamber, which was a miracle, because I was there last week. I was with Matthias Di Stefano down in Aswan, and we spent almost a week together. We had a great time. And then it was a very small group. And then I traveled up to Giza, and I didn't have an appointment. I just felt called to go to the pyramid again. And I've spent 17 nights in the pyramid at that point, and I wanted to spend my 18th. And it was funny because I tried to call all my contacts in, and the pyramid was fully booked. It was equinox. It was full moon. There's like no way to get in the pyramid. It was fully booked. So the only way I could go would be if somebody who had already booked it, because I only had a certain number of days. If somebody who already booked it somehow invited me, and I didn't know, they're not going to tell me who was who already had the pyramid booked. Well, I ended up going to the bent pyramid. I was saying a prayer. I had one other person with me, and saying a prayer in the bent pyramid. We finished the prayer. We're there for literally 20 minutes by ourselves, and the pyramid was packed, but somehow we got time all by ourselves. And next thing I know, I hear these people walking up the stairs behind me in the bent pyramid in the top chamber. And this guy taps me on the shoulder, and he's like, "Robert." And I turn around, and it's a guy named Adrian that had been with me to Egypt twice before on trips that I had hosted. And it changed his life so much that he decided, he's from Costa Rica, but he moved to Switzerland, and he decided to host trips to Egypt to pay it forward because it had a big, profound impact on him. And he says, "Oh, So, I can't believe I'm running into you here. What a coincidence. It's incredible. There's no such thing as coincidence, right? And he says, I'm hosting my first group, Robert. He was so proud of it and everything. And he said, we're supposed to be 9 people, but 2 people backed out at the last second.
Mm.
And he said, and tonight I rented the pyramid from midnight on.
Hmm.
It's too bad we're not 9 people, but we're 7. And then he's like, but wait, what are you doing tonight? And I'm like, I'm free. And he's like, come with us to the Great Pyramid for a private visit.
Hmm.
Nothing happens by accident.
Yeah.
I was there 30 minutes late from when I was supposed to be there at the Bent Pyramid. I bump into the one guy who's rented the pyramid for the night. And it happens to be a guy that I know who, wanted me to be there with him. And the night before I had just said, look, I'll just trust the universe that somehow we'll be able to get into the pyramid and spend the night there.
Mm.
And it happened.
Mm.
So there are no coincidences.
Mm.
We are often too close to the trees, zoomed in to see and perceive the forest. And we need to be able to zoom out to see the patterns of things. And then we made big discoveries that day too. In the Red Pyramid and the Bent Pyramid. We saw a big Alpha Chi Omega. There was big dragons on the walls. I mean, that literally like leapt out at us. It was so obvious.
Mm.
But the thing is that there are 2 types of people in the world: people that believe in miracles and people that don't. People that don't will never experience the miracle. People that believe in miracles might have a chance of experiencing miracles. And then there's a third type of person that evolves out of this second grouping.
Mm.
And that is the person that realizes that they are the miracle themselves. We can look at the world and say, the whole world is divine around us, except me. The world's not a difficult place because people hate each other as much as it is a difficult place. It can be because people hate themselves. And so often it's easy for us to perceive the majesty and divinity in the universe or U-inverse around us. And then we say, this whole world is perfect except for me. Well, by the way, if you perceive the whole world and the whole universe as being divine except you, that's egoistic. That's egotism right there.
Mm. It's good.
Because you are just as divine.
Yeah.
We are the miracle. Stop limiting yourself. We're here to learn how to break out of these conditioning biases, to unlearn what we have learned, to remember why our source creator, our higher self, chose this life for us. It's not what happened to us. It's what we chose. Why did we choose it? And when we finally merge back into that source consciousness feeling and meet God, which is what you help people do, then you tap into this super conscious, super awareness, and then find that balance of what you're talking about, where the hero and the villain can cohabitate, no longer fighting one another. It's flow, not fight.
Yeah, beautiful. So Robert, I know, in Egypt, probably you've spent the night in the king's chamber 18 times now, right? And so much is going on there. Can you walk us through a little bit about Egypt? Like just kind of give the general public about why Egypt is important, the math there, what happened there, and what you see unfolding in that timeline.
So the way I would describe it is that the Nile it's like a beginning and an ending of this spiritual life simulation or transition point. Okay. And the reason it is because I believe that what we consider the Garden of Eden was actually in this area of land that would be somewhere in southern Egypt and northern Sudan, and where the 4 rivers meet. And the Gihon River, according to Herodotus and Josephus, who are the 2 major historians from antiquity, was the Nile River. In fact, I found a map by a fellow, a cartographer by the name of Fra Mauro, and the map was in the Galileo Museum in Florence. And I looked at Egypt, and it had 5 pyramids on the Giza Plateau, which was interesting, instead of 3. And then the other thing I noticed was the Nile River wasn't named the Nile. It was named the Gihon River on the map. So I was like, wait a minute. This is supposed to be next to the 4 rivers, right, that were listed in the Bible. So there's the Gihon, the Pishon, the Euphrates and the Tigris. Now, this is all pre-flood. So what we think of today as Mesopotamia might not have actually been Mesopotamia at all. Might have just been Egypt. And Babylon, which is supposed to have been founded by the kingdom of Cush, the father of Nimrod, the guy who founded Babylon, was supposed to have built Babylon on the shores of the river Gihon. So wait, what's the real evidence that Mesopotamia is the location of what we call today the Fertile Crescent, which was what we use synonymously with the Garden of Eden? There's no evidence of it. So what we now can start to think about was, wait a minute, maybe in this metaphor for life, the Nile River, or the Gihon River, which means gushing water for the Cushite people, which were the people that lived in Ethiopia, Somalia, Sudan, and Egypt. These people were coming from this Garden of Eden area, which represent, if you think about the Nile, as a man sitting in lotus position, and the river going from Upper Egypt to Lower Egypt. Lower Egypt is what we would call Northern Egypt, or the part that flows into the Mediterranean, is like a lotus flower with the tributaries that flow out. There's 7 rivers that come off of that, right, into the tributary that flow out into the Mediterranean. The flowing starts at the base of the spine, and each of the temples along the Nile River have masculine, feminine forms of each of those, each one representing different musical notes and chakras. So it starts with Abu Simbel. Abu Simbel then goes to Philae and Aswan as one, right? And then that goes to Kamumbo, and Kamumbo becomes Luxor and Karnak, and each one of these are the different chakras along the spine of Osiris. Osiris is Orion, and it's just the hero's journey representation of humanity finding and remembering himself. And then you get up to the Giza Plateau, and that's the throat chakra. So each one of these is represented not only by musical notes, but also by zodiac signs. And the Giza Plateau is represented, it's called Ras Tau, or Ras Taui was the original name of Giza, which is Taurus backwards. The Great Pyramid, the other name for it is Bull Mountain. Black Bull Mountain. So the Taurus zodiac sign is representative of the throat chakra. And it's the throat chakra not only of Giza and about the whole Nile River, but also of the entire world on the ley line systems. So then it goes up to a pineal gland and a pituitary gland, which is 8 kilometers northwest of the Giza Plateau in a place called Abu Rawash, which is immediately adjacent to a part of Cairo that today is still called Babylon. That place was also built by Nimrod, the son of Cush, who was the father of the Cushite people, right? And the grandson of Noah. And the great-grandson would be Nimrod. Nimrod is commemorated as the stars of Orion. So here we are, when we look at the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid, the shape of it is a 2-to-1 rectangle. Actually represents Orion constellation. Once we move the sarcophagus to the center of the room, it actually exoscribes around the 3 belt stars of Orion. And we already know that the 3 pyramids are represented by Orion's belt, right? Because they're matching, just like the Teotihuacan pyramids, just like the Chinese Xi'an pyramids. They're all Orion's belt orientations, right? Because Orion is specifically responsible for throat chakra. And so what we find is that the walls are covered, and we discovered this, and you'll see it in my next season of Codex on Gaia, that we discovered that all of the walls are covered in the 48 astrological constellations of what's called the decan and the zodiacal signs. There's 36 of them, and each one of them, there are 3 for every 3 of the decan of astrology. There's 1 major zodiac sign, like Taurus. And within Taurus is Auriga, Eridanus, and Orion constellations, right? Within Capricorn, we have the 3 constellations, which are Delphinus, Sagitta, and Aquila. And what we found on the wall is the east wall of the Great Pyramid's King's Chamber has Delphinus riding a Pegasus, and the Pegasus is from Aquarius. It's one of the deacons of Aquarius. So Delphinus is flying on the back of the Pegasus, shooting the Sagitta arrow at Aquila the eagle. We found all on the wall, on the east wall, exactly where it should be, right adjacent to a man who's Aquarius. Orion is on the north wall, along with the bull and the Apis bull and the cow, the Hathor. So what this is showing us is that mankind is represented by Orion. Orion starts out as a conqueror, a man who wants to use his power, his avarice, his control to control and conquer the universe, in effect, until he finally finds himself. He thinks he's a hero that's battling a villain, that finally he has to learn to integrate that villain. And as such, he goes through his own hero's journey. He gets the gift from the goddess, and there's 17 stages of the hero's journey. The 24,000-year clock cycle is all depicted on the walls of the King's Chamber. And all of this is to remind us of who we are. What is the purpose of the Great Pyramid? I believe that it's a spiritual ascension stargate of higher consciousness.
Yeah.
And each of the constellations are literally embedded into the crystalline structure of the rose granite and granite walls, which are predominantly, they're like up to between 15 and 55% quartz crystal. They are a memory and a coordinate system. Each block has a different x-axis, a different y-axis value, and a different z-axis. It's literally a coordinate in space-time. And when we learn to transcend beyond judgment, which is the source of suffering, and instead choose love, because enlightenment is when your expression of love supersedes your desire for one objective truth. When you finally make that leap, then you're ready to go into another realm of experience, which is the new higher consciousness of love experience of Christ consciousness. That's what's upon us right now in the world. So either we choose more judgment, to go deeper into judgment. This is right, this is wrong, this is the battle between Democrats and Republicans, this is whatever it is, or we choose instead love, because we realized that what we judge is what we will attract. And if we can stop judging negatively, it will no longer exist in our existence. This is a difficult thing for people to grasp, because the hero has gotten very used to identifying itself by the parameters of the villain. So we have to learn to unlearn and let go of that identification of persona. But it doesn't mean that you're like merged into some hive mind, because our entire purpose of being here is the individuation. You're a psychiatrist, so you would have studied Carl Jung. And he wrote a book called Aeon, right, which is really about the path of individuation. Individuation doesn't mean loss of your personality. It means fully embracing it. Both aspects of it. It's the enlightenment path. It would be the next stage of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, going beyond self-actualization to self-transcendence. And that's what happens with the third layer of the throat chakra. The three pyramids represent self-awareness. The Great Pyramid, Khafre Pyramid is self-actualization, and Menkaure Pyramid, the smallest, the most holy actually, is self-transcendence. This is when you literally can start speaking things into reality. Magic becomes your experience, and miracle upon miracle upon miracle is what you become to identify yourself with, your whole self. To be holy means to be WHOLLY. To be whole.
Yeah.
And that's what's beautiful, because that's what's emerging now. And I think it's the most incredible time to be alive. Because we have this opportunity now to choose love instead of judgment.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So, Egypt, chakras, Nile River, perhaps where the Garden of Eden was, coming up the spine, the throne of God, as within, so without. And so it's literally activating the chakras as you come up the Nile River. And, Moses, Noah's ancestors probably were there. And so with that being said, it comes all the way down to the Great Pyramid. It throws in Orion. And Orion, although he thinks he's chasing something, eventually you see that the victim is the hero is the victim, and you learn how to love everything. And you, instead of stepping out of judgment, so the hero and villain merge and collapse into one.
Yes. Beautiful, which is basically the opposite sign of Orion is Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus was the scorpion. So, Scorpio goes through this transition. We think of Lucifer as Scorpius, right? We think of that it's like a scorpion context, which like stings you. Not a nice thing. So at the feet of Ophiuchus is the scorpion. The scorpion transmutes eventually into the snake. The snake then transmutes into the eagle. The eagle transmutes into the phoenix, the Bennu bird. And then the phoenix transmutes into Asclepius, the rod of Asclepius. So the story is, the mythology story is that Orion, one of the ways that he dies, and there are many ways that Orion dies. The reason is because it's telling the story of Orion in all of his different incarnations. It's not just one incarnation. He had many ways that he died. One way, he was chasing the Pleiades, and he found and fell in love with Artemis, and then Artemis got challenged by her brother Apollo, that she wasn't that good of an archer, and she couldn't hit this guy swimming far away, and she fires the arrow at him and ends up inadvertently and accidentally killing Orion, the man she was in love with, right? And so he gets codified in the stars for this. Another story is that he's stung by a scorpion. And this part of it relates to your work. So the story of Orion is that he's stung by a scorpion and he dies from the scorpion. But he is saved ultimately by Asclepius, who has the staff of Hermes, right? Or the rod with the snake around it, bringing the healing power, which represents the Kundalini awakening. And you probably know that the most expensive drug on earth is scorpion venom.
I didn't know that.
Do you know for 1 gallon, it costs $39 million?
Why?
They harvest it because they use it in Afghanistan as like an extreme buffo or an extreme combo. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Scorpion venom is like, now, don't go run off and start trying to buy this stuff, okay?
Yeah. You know me.
I know. You're like, damn, okay, this is a new one.
Hold up. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, Orion gets stung by a scorpion. He doesn't actually die, but he experiences an ego death. What he does is he merges with his opposite consciousness, his shadow, which is Asclepius. The two together then change into the sitting god, Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus is Asclepius sitting down, and he's got a snake, and he's got it tamed around him. He's got one wrapped around his arm, right? And it's like laying on his lap. He doesn't want to conquer anymore. Do you know Alexander the Great?
That's deep, yeah.
Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, and Napoleon Bonaparte had one thing in common, besides being conquerors. The thing that they had in common was that they all spent the night in the Great Pyramid. And all three of them came out the next morning changed to the point where they didn't want to conquer anymore.
Whoa.
Which ended up in the death of essentially all three, because in the case of Julius Caesar, he came back to Rome after spending the night in the pyramid. Plus, he'd also fallen in love with Cleopatra, and he had a baby with Cleopatra, a cesarean, that then threatened who was going to be potentially in control. And his nephew, Brutus, thought he was going to be getting the birthright of Julius Caesar. And then the Ides of March came around not long after, and they stabbed him in the back on the Senate floor. The first knife in his back was by his nephew, Brutus. In the case of Alexander the Great, here he was, this incredible marauding conqueror who was able to go and beat Dariush and was able to travel all the way to India. And, ultimately died in Egypt right? And he didn't want to conquer so much anymore either. He started going down the spiritual path.
Yeah.
People thought he was losing his mind after he spent the night in the pyramid.
That's insane. So three of the greatest conquerors who literally had probably some of the greatest egos, hero, villain construct on the planet of history, Mother Earth, somehow
Yes.
went into the king's chamber. And
Yes.
somehow, like Orion got a scorpion sting of somehow. I don't know what happened in there, but something, their ego somehow was transformed when they came out, and literally they didn't want to conquer him. They merged and became the man. They somehow merged hero villain somehow in the king's chamber. What the fuck do you think happened in the chamber?
Well, the way it was described by Napoleon Bonaparte,
You've been in there
right,
like 17, 18 times.
yeah, I have, and it totally changed me. Changed everything in me. I didn't want to conquer anymore either. I realized that the battle that I was having was a battle with myself in the U-inverse construct. So it's interesting because when Napoleon Bonaparte was asked, and the next morning they let him out of the pyramid, and they said, "What did you see?" And he said, "You wouldn't believe it if I told you." And I've had experiences in the Great Pyramid, in the King's Chamber, where I've met entities. I've had incredible experiences in there. Why would I go back 18 times? It's not exactly like it's on Airbnb and you could like just rent it for fun, you know, and plus it's not even that fun. What the hell do you do after like a few times?
Yeah.
Every time I've gone, it has been the greatest wisdom teaching, like beyond.
Wow.
And what happened to Napoleon, he came back, you know, he just defeated Palestine. And he ends up spending the night in the Great Pyramid, and he goes back to France. He doesn't want to conquer anymore. In fact, he wrote a mathematical theorem. He wanted to be a mathematician instead, because that's the other thing. After having been in the pyramid, he got downloads of mathematics, and he wrote a theorem that's called the Bonaparte theorem. Look it up. And it basically showed that any triangle, scalene or otherwise, if you place an equilateral triangle for each of its sides, and make the center point of each of those equilateral triangles that are adjacent to each of the sides of a scalene or isosceles or an equilateral triangle will always form, the center points will attach to create another equilateral triangle. This is a math theorem, a geometric proof that was written by Napoleon Bonaparte himself.
Wow.
He didn't want to conquer anymore. Instead, he wanted to turn his interest to math and scientific pursuit, which is interesting because that didn't exactly sit well with all the people that were benefiting from him conquering. So it wasn't long after that he ended up getting exiled. All three of these people were the biggest conquerors of all time.
Yeah.
All changed by the Great Pyramid. This is the journey of remembering. This is why it exists. It's like the totem inside of, you've seen the movie Inception.
Yeah.
Where they had a little top that you would spin to remember that you're in the dream, right? The Great Pyramid is that top totem. So when we go into it, we start remembering that we're in the dream, and it slowly wakes us up out of this slumber and brings us into the awareness of who we are and why we chose what we chose. And we slowly then integrate our omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence back into our world. That's the God realization.
Yeah. Yeah. And so obviously, like, these three great men go into the, including you, and you go into there, and like literally there's a transformation. You're seeing entities. And obviously you also stated that you believe it's an ascension chamber. And from my studies, that's where Joshua 12, the real Jesus, actually ascended out of. So underneath the earth, and somehow it's connecting us to the stars. Or to the star beings, and which is activating some type of DNA within us, which is actually somehow integrating the ego, which is also then somehow giving codes, from merging, if you want to say, hero and villain, so that afterwards it's like about mathematics, and the universe is mathematical. And so it's the Great Pyramids. Wow. Okay.
So the ceiling itself, I've been in there on several occasions. It happened just this last week, where the ceiling disappeared and I saw stars. And I've been out. There was the second time I went to the Great Pyramid, I laid in the sarcophagus and I went on a journey for 5 hours out the ceiling. And there was no psychedelics involved, nothing at all, just breathing. and oming.
Mm.
And as I was in this cycle that was autonomic,
Mm.
all of a sudden I see an 8-petaled flower of life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an 8-petaled flower of life with like almost like ellipsoids on each of the flowers. So it's a different shape than the normal flower of life. And I saw stars open up as it rotated. So I could see stars. And then I went back again, and I ended up going out the ceiling. I was gone for 5 hours.
Mm.
And I went to the Botus system. I went to Pleiades. I was
Mm.
hosted by Arcturian guides
Mm.
and who were just future humans.
Mm.
And then I was there again in 2021 and the entire ceiling, and I had 50 people in the room, and many people saw it.
Mm.
The entire ceiling to turn to stars.
Mm.
And I was like, oh shit, what happens if we all go out? Like that was a little scary. I'm like, I'm responsible for these people type of thing.
Mm.
And I'm not the only one who's experienced this type of stuff. Lots of people have.
Mm.
So this whole thing is about this journey of remembrance. And it's not just about the pyramid. It connects every single aspect of your life.
Yeah.
Every little decision you've made is literally revealed to you as being part of your journey. That's the entire point. And what I wrote here in the 6th point was, as the avatar, you will learn to see the unseen. Start believing, if not already, in miracles, because mira in Spanish is the word for look. And clay, miracle, is to see the key, to see patterns and recognize repetitions within your life experience and the others that you perceive, even though they're not really truly others. Study the art of science, study the science of art. Realize that everything connects to everything else, and remind yourself daily to reverse the age-old saying of seeing is believing, and embrace that instead believing is seeing.
So this is almost like taking Hermes' laws to a next level, because Hermes' laws are included in what you're saying, but you're
Yes.
actually expanding upon them.
Yes. And so let me just continue with it, because I
Yeah.
think I've not done this on a podcast. So seek not validation from others, quote unquote. You are not what you do. Your identity is independent of your accomplishments. Always remember that the harshest criticism comes from your own conscious mind and reflects back to us in our outer universe of experience. Learn to accept constructive criticism from others. Be willing to stand for something, or recognize that you will potentially fall for anything. Learn to see that anything that triggers you emotionally is actually an opportunity to learn and expand your awareness of self. Likewise, practice observing existence without judging or complaining about people, places, or things. Realize that in this life, we attract everything we judge until we no longer judge everything we attract. Surround yourself with people who practice the same. What you judge positively or negatively in others is what you either like or dislike about how you see yourself. A truly humble person perceives only humility, as he or she is resonating to the frequency of humility. Likewise, arrogance will perceive arrogance in others. Piousness perceives piousness. Like will always perceive like, as a principle of sympathetic resonance. Just as a knife is incapable of cutting itself, or a light illuminating itself, an eye seeing itself without the aid of a mirror, the persona is incapable of perceiving its full self. Number 9, abandon erasing and deleting things from your awareness that are unpleasant to you. Instead, see the beauty in the polarity and the imperfections of the world, and lean into the discomfort you experience. Remember that all unattractive characteristics you eradicate from your persona will only multiply in your field around you in a new reflection. Learn to transmute the pain of suffering resulting from judgment into the gold of soul evolution. Number 10, know that the world doesn't happen to you. Know that it is constantly happening for and through you. Just as a hammer perennially seeks a nail, know that consciousness will always attract self-similar and vibrational matching consciousness. Victim consciousness leads to more victimhood, and like will always attract like through sympathetic resonance. When things don't go your way, ask the existential questions: why you chose what you chose to learn in this existence. Be resilient. Fall down and get back up. Fail fast and learn to both appreciate and enjoy the journey of life with all its twists and turns. Participate in a daily self-care regimen of mindfulness, meditation, and intentional choice, exercise, and diet. What you decide to undertake in this area is entirely up to you, and what you decide is far less important than the decision to exercise discipline in your self-care practice. belief of consequence more than specific regimen, activity, or practice determines outcome and overall sustaining results. Try to authentically feel and express deep empathy and gratitude for all perspectives, viewpoints, and people. Admittedly, this can be very challenging at times. Also, feel the same for the flora and fauna and Mother Earth itself. Count your blessings in moments of uncertainty and despair. Sincere expression of gratitude raises vibration almost instantaneously. For many, it is impossible to feel the depths of despair while in a state of sincere gratitude for your ability to insert whatever you feel grateful for, your ability to breathe, your mental capacity, your sustenance, etc. Number 12, choose to express love over the desire for the collection of one or many objective truths or facts that prove your point of making you right in the eyes of others. Remember ultimately that there are no others truly separate from you and your you inverse. Always remember that what you perceive as fact is merely a facet of a larger prism of a more holistic truth. The only objective truth is the love that underlies it all. 13, genuinely fall in love with the world as it is and without condition. Fall completely in love with yourself and curtail persistently negative self-narratives and self-deprecating speech. Never forget that what you voice will eventually be made manifest as an effective cause. 14, be the change you desire to see and experience in the world around you. Know that no one on earth has a higher percentage of darkness within them than anyone else. While some are more aware of their darkness and others less so, each is at a different stage of their awakening and individuation process. Learn to both accept the existence of your shadow consciousness and integrate this awareness into recognition and love. Always remember that it is not the enmity that individuals or collectives hold for one another that makes Earth life so difficult, but rather self-loathing makes it so. Likewise, it is not the sin that makes life miserable, but rather the shame and resultant blame that accumulates within us and or our surrounding field of experience. 15, study the quadrivium of arithmetic, which is number in itself, geometry, number in space, music, number in time, and cosmology, number in space-time. Memorize this phrase and say it often. The more I learn, the less I actually know. Recognize that the brain is more a receiver and antenna than a hard drive storage device. One of the things that Bashar said to me yesterday, not Bashar, but Daryl Anka, is he said, your higher self is the conceiver, your brain is the receiver, right? And the life and experience that we have around us is what we will perceive. So it is the conceiver, the receiver, and the perceiver. And you could say that's your superconscious mind, right? And then the conscious mind, right? And then the subconscious mind. And all of these come together to create this experience that altogether can be the superconscious when we remember who we are. So conceiver, receiver, perceiver. Like any muscle, your brain thrives with both balance and use. Always, always, always commit and recommit to importantly being teachable. 16, engage in the daily practice of random acts of kindness and service to others, and importantly, doing so while expecting absolutely nothing in return. 17, realize that everyone you meet and every experience you encounter can be a divine source communication to you. That this is how the universe communicates to us. Maintain an attitude of learning profundity from the most simple aspects of life. This includes all encounters within your universe. Learn to see and register the synchronicities from your higher self. 18, practice mindfulness and intentionality in all that you do. Maintain an attitude of gratitude and allow yourself to feel all emotions you feel coming into your heart, solar plexus, and mind centers. Remember that how you do one thing is very often how you will do anything and everything. 19, seek friendships and romantic relationships that reflect where your consciousness is evolving toward in its ever-expanding progression. Remember that the heart never has to completely break. It always expands as the ego continues the process of breaking and dissolving its seemingly never-ending layers of shells. 20, match your frequency through modulation of your emotional states. Never forget that we perceive the world as we are and not necessarily as it is. Learn to identify and match vibrational states of your desires on a moment-by-moment basis. Bring these desires into your material world perception through these matching processes, gratitude and intentional choice. 21, embrace the value and beauty of your unique expression, perception, and individuation path. Your unique perspective on life and all things is a highly necessary aspect of the universe. The universe expands its own wisdom and empathy through these unique perspectives. Our observations through the lens of conditioning bias form the foundation of experience and emotional responses. The only thing that is real in the universal mind matrix is how we feel. Likewise, there are no mistakes, only learnings in this matrix of mind. When you take people on journeys, medicine journeys, they can feel emotional responses to the stimulus that their higher selves are giving them in their journey. It's just as real as this life because the emotion makes it so. We are here to feel, not to avoid the feelings. We have to feel all the feelings, even the feelings that we tried to avoid. We eventually have to go back. They're like rungs on a ladder that eventually we have to go back and touch every single rung.
Yeah.
Know that you will continue to experience the same life lessons until you have ceased the negative judgments of the opposite learning. Be aware that in this U inverse, we learn precepts through experiencing opposites. If you are here to learn unconditional love, and that's on your chosen menu by your higher self, then your recurrent life theme will be conditional love and betrayal. Until you no longer judge negatively the conditional love and betrayal you experienced. Know and repeat back to yourself daily that you are perfect, complete, and beautiful just as you are. Earth can either become a heavenly paradise or a hellish escape room. The choice is ours. There will be no escaping Earth. There is only the transcendence of the past Earth experience. And this only when you genuinely fall in love with the entire experience without condition. 22, take risk, be vulnerable, embrace discomfort, love deeply and completely, leave nothing on the table left unexperienced. Live every day as if it's your last. Never forget the most important learning from life is to simply to learn to love and to be loved in return. There's no actual death, only a physical transition to another like plane of existence again, and like will always attract like. There is no God judgment waiting for us, either during or after this lifetime. The only real judgments are self-imposed, self-inflicted, and our own. 23, if you think you can or you think you can't, you'll be right. Be an optimist. Be kind in your dealings while remaining firm, standing for your beliefs and passions. Statues are never erected for pessimists, and recognize that pessimists never refer to themselves as pessimists and instead prefer to be known as realists. Become acquainted with societal conditioning biases and the patterns of your experiences and various conditioning biases you unconsciously subscribe to. Know that the only real obstacles in life are the ones that we persistently believe in. And 24, exercise your talents, explore your depths, have fun. Learn to create and play in this beautiful world of God, remembrance, and realization. When you are ready and have mastered the above precepts, you will transform your U inverse into a paradise through love. An existence without scarcity of resources or even time itself. The destination is set and there is no failure or running out of time. There are no mistakes. Fall in love with your soul journey from your higher self that he has chosen for you, he and she have chosen for you to experience. Surrender to the beauty of this divine unfolding. If you commit to the awareness and integration of only a small percentage of the above list, you will be astonished just how rapidly the world around you transforms into a new paradigm and vibrational state.
Oh, I fucking hope. That's like almost like the 24 rules for life right there. Yeah, the beautiful transmission. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, and it was because partially of you that I, after having met you, that I was able to bring this transmission in.
Are you going to share that, Robert? Are you going to share that on a website, or are you going to share that?
Yes, I am. I'm going to put it on my website. I'm like doing some stuff around it so it looks nice and everything. But yes, I'm going to share it. And I've already shared it in part. I shared the whole thing actually on my Instagram, but it wasn't a format that easily people could forward and, send links to and stuff like that. So I'm putting it on my website, and it's going to be like a manifesto.
Beautiful, beautiful. For my own curiosity, I just wanted to ask you about a few numbers and your perception on a few numbers.
Okay.
The number 13, what's your take on 13?
So 13 is to me, it's a very powerful number. And it's funny because the number 13, if you go to Asia,
Mhm.
if you'll notice, like here in the United States, we don't have 13th floors.
Hmm.
Have you ever noticed that?
You never noticed that? No.
Most buildings don't have 13 floors.
Hmm.
Like the 13th floor is like missing on the
What do they
elevator.
do? They just skip it? It's 12 to
Yeah, they
14?
skip it.
Oh,
They just
I
skip
didn't
it.
know.
The reason
Huh.
is because it's unlucky, right? The number 13 is unlucky.
Really?
There were 13 months in the Hebrew calendar, and the
Hmm.
Romans didn't like that. They wanted to be back at 12, so the 13th was gone.
Wow.
But in Asia, it's the number 4
Hmm.
because the number 4 in Korean is sa,
Mhm. Mhm.
which is like the chukul satja, right? Which is the death.
Mm.
Number 4 sounds like the word for death,
Mhm.
right? The Chinese character that's
Mm.
a reference to it as well.
Mm.
So, but if you think about it, 13 is also 4 because 1 plus 3 equals 4,
Hmm.
right? So
Mm.
we've got this thing in our psychology of the
Mm.
missing 13th.
Mm.
Ophiuchus is the missing 13th constellation of the
Mm.
zodiac. It's already recognized in the sidereal, right, procession of equinox as being its own constellation that would be a zodiac.
Can you
It
tell us
sits,
explain a little about Ophiuchus?
yeah,
Just
Ophiuchus is,
before,
it
but
was a story I was just telling
yeah.
about Orion getting stung in the foot.
And then Orion becomes Ophiuchus.
Yeah, Orion becomes like Ophiuchus because
Interesting.
Ophiuchus is his shadow that he didn't like. That was the scorpion that became the snake, that became the eagle, that became the phoenix, that became the
Mm.
godlike man, the sitting god.
Mm.
Okay, that finally has control of his kundalini and no longer wants to conquer.
Mm.
So Orion was a hunter. The way that it's depicted and is also referred to as the painting of Bacchus, which
Mm.
was by Leonardo da Vinci, which is actually a man sitting down with a snake on his lap that was painted over in the 18th century with leopard skin. It's not leopard skin. He's got a snake. You can see the snake head on his lap, and he's sitting on the back of a demon that he finally has control of. He also has a beehive on the top of his head, which represents the Hierophant. And there's an elephant hidden in the darkness to his side, again representing the Hierophant, a priest king.
Mm-hmm.
Ophiuchus represents the aspect of Orion that is redeemed.
Mm.
It's when his ego died and he realized his individuation path by acceptance of that aspect of himself that he thought was the villain. It's when he integrated with the villain. The scorpion was the villain that stung Orion in the foot. But yet, in the zodiac, the scorpion sits exactly at the feet of Ophiuchus.
Mm.
Ophiuchus and Orion are the same person. Each of the constellations of the 12 zodiac signs, they are tied to each other. So Taurus has a shadow consciousness, which is Scorpio, right? Aries has a shadow consciousness as well. They all have shadow consciousness that links to them, right? And so you start to look at what is it that's 6 months apart from each one. And that's how you know what the shadow will be. You know, I do a lot of work with Myers-Briggs and human design and also gene keys and all of that. There have to be an even number of constellations in order for it all to work, because each one of the zodiac signs has an opposite, which is representing the shadow characteristics. So, for example, right, it's like the things that I don't like about myself are the things that I judge in the world around me, and those happen to be the things associated with being a Scorpio. Because I am what I judge, because I'm not perceiving the world as it is, I'm perceiving it as I am. And the darkness that I perceive in myself, I push out of me, and I don't want to be aware of it. I want to be in denial of it. So therefore, it shows up in the world around me. The characteristics and traits I don't like about myself, the stinging scorpion, right? That's like very self-interested. These are all things that I don't like about myself. I don't want to admit exist. And so therefore, I judge it in the world around me, and then it just keeps propagating over and over again until finally I stop judging it. And finally, I integrate these aspects and realize that I am that I am. Aye, Ashe, Aye. Right? So it's this I am that I am context, that the things we judge are the things that we are, that we simply don't want to be aware of. So Asclepius and Ophiuchus are the representation of the way Orion perceives his shadow. His shadow of darkness, which was this snake, now turns into a healing magician. The person who combined with Orion becomes the Hierophant, the priest king, realizing that everybody is king. You don't need to have like one guy in control or an overlord over everybody. He doesn't need to conquer anything anymore. So in the painting of Ophiuchus and the sitting god, in the distance you can see a sphinx lion. You can also see a deer. And the deer is relaxed. It's sanguine. It's not running away from Orion, who's going to hunt it down, because Orion no longer wants to conquer. That's what Ophiuchus represents. But for there to be a 13th zodiac, then that means there has to be a 14th as well. And Ophiuchus sits 1 degree above the plane of the ecliptic, and Orion sits 1 degree below the plane of the ecliptic. So the center point of the zodiac, of the 12 zodiac, the center point, so you've got 12 points around the circle, just like a dodecagram, right? But there's a center point as well. And the center point is the yin yang of Ophiuchus and Orion merging. That's what is going through the hero's journey. We never have 12 points around without recognizing that if I connect those 12 points, there's going to be a center overlapping point of intersection. That center point is reflected on 2 sides of the zodiac in the 13th and 14th constellations. Has to be an odd number, or even number, excuse me. It can't be an odd number. So the 13th is us realizing what we thought was this negative number of superstition, now being redeemed into the beauty of this realization. The Hierophant, the priest king. And I think that's what's going on, right? And above the constellation of Ophiuchus is Corona Borealis. It's the crown. It's shaped like a beehive. And when you buzz your pineal gland, and there's a little exercise you could do where you like put your fingers, your thumbs in your nose, in your ears, and then your pinkies in your nose, and then you cover your eyes with these 2 fingers, and then you just go, and you feel it buzz your pineal gland. That's the beehive activating, right? It's the B note. The king's chamber is the C note. It says on one wall, 126, which is a C note. And on the other, the king's chamber has a sarcophagus resonance of 117 hertz, which is the square root, 11.7 is the square root of 137. The number of times the sarcophagus fits when you stack it inside the king's chamber is 137 times. And that is the diameter of a circle with circumference of 432. Now we're back to the tetractys. 4, 3, 2, 1. So wait a minute. The diameter of a circle with circumference of 432 is 137? Yeah, it is. And it's also Euler to the power of pi. Euler to the power of pi equals 1 over 4, 3, 2, 1. Move the decimal on here. What this allows you to do is turn the pain of duality into the gold of experience. So what do I mean? So we think of the number 2 as duality, right? We split the circle into 2 parts, light and dark. We spin it, we have yin yang, right? It's spinning. And the light is within the dark, and the dark is within the light. Just like the eye of the yin yang, the eyes of the fish. And this is us coming out of the Piscean, right? The Piscean age. So as we think about this notion of the separation of 2-ness, if I were to say, what would be the spirit of the number 2, it could be defined as the square root of 2 because it's infinite. The spirit is infinite. The essence is infinite. So the square root of 2 is actually the essence of duality.
Hmm.
And all musical notes start from that point, because the way you create a scale in music theory
Mhm.
is to simply start by multiplying a unison note value, it could be 432, and multiplying it by 1.4142, and that gives you the exact middle of the scale of that octave.
Hmm.
And why is that? Well, because an octave is 8, the square root of 8 equals 2.828, and 1/2 of that, or finding the mean value of it, the center point, is 1.4142.
Hmm.
So multiplying 432 by the square root of 2 gives you the center point of the octave. Well, then you could just take every root of 2.
Mhm.
So the 1/12th root of 2, the second 12th root of 2, the third 12th root of 2, and this will give you every note in the scale. So
Hmm.
our foundational basis of the spectrum of light and sound is root 2, duality. And we think we're here to judge it, one or the other. It's like the two swords, right? In the tarot card. We have to judge one or the other. And duality brings with it a lot of suffering and difficulty, because in pleasure, there must always be pain. Because you have to realize that one doesn't exist without the other.
Hmm.
Each always must exist and cohabitate at the same moment. So then we think, okay, well, then what would be the essence of divinity? Maybe 3. We think of the Trinity, we think of a equilateral triangle,
Mhm.
right? Each side of this equilateral triangle representing Father, Son, Holy Ghost, or Holy Mother.
Mhm.
So the square root of 3 gives you the essence of the Trinity, of the divine aspect. Now, if we add the square root of 2 to the square root of 3,
Mhm.
what does it equal? So root 2 and
Mhm.
root 3 together
Yeah.
equals 3.146.
Alright.
So it's really close to pi, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's kind of shocking. Like, why
Mhm.
did I ever learn that? It's like, so wait, so the essence of duality, which is suffering and lead of experience, and the square root of 2 looks like the symbol in alchemy for Saturn,
Mm.
Satan,
Mm.
suffering,
Mm.
difficulty, the lead of experience. We add it to the square root of 3, the divinity aspect,
Mhm.
and we have pi full circle.
Mm.
So what percentage of that circle, or how many degrees of that circle, would be ascribable to the square root of 2? And so
Mm.
the way you take that is you just take the square root of 2, which is 1.4142, plus 1.73205, which is the square root of 3, equals 3.146. Then you take 3.146 divided by 1.4142,
Mhm.
right? And then take that reciprocal value,
Mhm.
and you end up with 0.449 and change, right? All the way out.
Mhm.
And then we'd multiply that by 360 degrees to see how many degrees of the circle are represented by the lead of our experience.
Mhm. Mhm.
And guess what the number is? 161.8 degrees. What's 1618?
Mhm.
The golden ratio.
Mm.
So the square root of 2 becomes gold from lead. It's all in how we decide to understand the context of the square root of 3. Our experience in duality is an experience of lead and difficulty and challenge and judgment, until we finally get the context of the divine. And when we understand the divine and the reason why we hear that the higher self has chosen for us this experience, then every single experience,
Yeah.
you've had experiences where you look back on your life, and when you experienced it, you're like, oh, that was the worst thing that ever happened to me. And then somehow over time,
Mm.
you look back and you say, well, but if that hadn't happened, it wouldn't have led to this.
Mm.
And then within a short amount of time, often I've looked back on my life and said, wow, that turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me.
Mm.
I've transmuted my experience of lead and difficulty
Mm.
into an experience of gold, because now I understand the context. I no longer ask, why did it happen to me? the universe doesn't happen to me. It happens for and through me.
Mm.
And now I can find out what my higher self was trying for me to learn and to embody,
Mm.
to bring into my awareness. And then the thing that was really terrible, the breakup, somebody passing away, all these things that I would have never, ever believed I could say might actually turn into one of the best things, if not the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is turning lead into gold.
That's fucking brilliant. I love how you just took that math. Literally, I just asked you what 13 was, and you literally broke it down to why Asia and in Western they skip 4 and 13, 3 plus 1 is 4, and you literally broke it down into that similar theme that you're showing us through this math, through life, is this play of non-judgment, realizing that we are all one and everything is working for us, and alchemizing the hero and the villain into one. And literally at that moment, everything at that moment becomes a miracle. And you literally just broke that down in the language of math. And the universe is mathematical.
And you know what's beautiful about, you asked about Egypt and why the significance of Egypt? Because the story is the story of Orion.
Mm.
The story of Orion. And there's a show on Netflix right now called Orion in the Dark. It's a cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about how Orion has to integrate his fear of darkness.
Mm.
And if you haven't noticed it right now, Orion's showing up everywhere, right? There's now Meta's making new goggles, right? New glasses,
Mm-hmm.
which are, this augmented reality. They've decided to call it Orion. I launched an app called Orion, which is about freeing your voice. Orion representing.
Can you tell us more about your app? Because I think this is going to be super important for what's to come. Robert created an app called Orion. And for everybody out there, just freedom of speech, number one. But can you tell us more about that, Robert? And for what's
Sure, absolutely. And it's related to what I was going to tell you anyway, because in the story of Osiris had an affair with his sister-in-law. He had an affair with his sister-in-law in Egyptian mythology.
Mm-hmm. Osiris
is Orion constellation, by the way. And the story is that he slept with his brother's wife, and his brother got angry because his brother's wife got pregnant, and they had a child called Anubis, right, which is the dog man that is in the underworld.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, Satan also, his brother, was not happy. He was none too happy about his brother sleeping with his wife. And so he decides to play a trick on his brother and kill him. And Osiris was the king, and everyone loved the king, and he was very popular and kind of a studly guy. And so he makes this incredible coffin for his brother and says, look, I made this coffin, and whoever can lay in this gets to keep this coffin. It's kind of a ridiculous story, right? Mm-hmm. Who would fall for this? It's kind of slapstick. So Osiris, big ego that he is, decides to lay down in this incredibly beautiful new coffin. And of course, his brother pushes him, keeps him down, and then nails the lid shut and throws him in the river, kills him, right? Then cuts his body into 14 pieces. Now, Leonardo da Vinci did the same thing with the Vitruvian Man. Vitruvian Man has a cut at his chest. He has a line across his neck, another one at his pineal gland, another one at his crown, another one at his elbows, another at his wrist, another at his knees, another at his groin, cutting him into 14 parts. And at the top of the text, he wrote in backward mirrored text that he cut his man into 14 parts, leaving 1/14. Now, the 1/14 was that Isis, his wife, Osiris's wife, was upset. She decides to go find all the body pieces that were cut up by Set, the 14 pieces, and she finds all but one piece, his penis. So she has to fashion, and she goes to look for them with Nephthys, her sister, who'd had the affair with Osiris in the first place. So they never find the penis. Some say that the penis was eaten by fish in the river. Others say it was taken by Nephthys, the sister, and kept as a souvenir. Whatever it was doesn't matter, because the way that Osiris reincarnated in the form of his son Horus was that Isis made a quartz crystal penis for her husband, and then placed it on him, and then she had sex with this and got pregnant and had a child named Horus. Horus is from the word horology, or the study of time. And from this, time begins, right? Literally, time begins. But Horus he has a battle with his uncle because to avenge his father, and which is really the reincarnation of Osiris in the first place. And in the process, Set plucks out the left eye of Horus. Thoth repairs it. This is all metaphor for us finding and remembering and finding this resurrection within and getting back our eye of intuition. Our left eye connects through our optic chiasm to our right brain, and our right eye connects to our left brain hemisphere. The optic chiasm is the place where it meets to form this X shape right at the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is the feminine. The pineal gland is the masculine. The two glands can actually meet through a breathing exercise, and you can make them touch electrically, which then is like having sex in your own brain. And I teach this on my television show on Gaia, which is called The Divine Encryption. And you can learn about this, and I teach, what people refer to as alchemical union, right? Or sex magic, others refer to it as. But you can do it by yourself also. You can do it with a partner, you can do it by yourself. So this missing 1/14th is connected to the 13 that you were just talking about. The 13th is Ophiuchus, but the missing 1/14th is the remembrance of the I amness. That Osiris is the 14th. Orion is the 14th constellation. And this is the magic of this hero's journey. So in this process of studying all of this and realizing that the throat chakra is literally controlled by the Orion constellation, or Osiris in Egyptian mythology, or Nimrod in other mythology, Hungarian, that the throat chakra has these three layers of self-awareness, self-actualization, self-transcendence. I saw a time in the future, and I've always been able to see around corners. I've always seen the future. And I knew that data would become the world's most valuable asset. Not from the perspective that we're thinking about, how your data is mined, although that's an important thing. The thing that this is going to become a real big challenge for is a threat to our own individuation in our perception. Our individuation is our most valuable thing. But now people can copy, as we go through this transition to the next phases of consciousness. Big tech companies are able to copy our individuation and make a digital doppelganger of you, Sam. They have the right to recreate you. Read your terms and conditions. They can recreate you and create derivative content of you. You may, their way they're thinking about it is not necessarily so nefarious. They might be thinking as, okay, Sam doesn't want to do podcast anymore, so we'll make one for him that's him, that's indistinguishable from reality. They can actually take your own essence. There's already 56 pages on me and everything I would choose politically because I've seen them, I've read them.
Wow.
So this is what's at issue. We need encryption to create the borders of our individuation. Enlightenment does not mean the hive mind. We have to maintain our individuation, just as Carl Jung says. We're in fact going to celebrate that individuation. In order to do that in the digital world, we need encryption. So there's no market until now of being able to protect your data so that it cannot just be, you can't be recreated as a digital doppelganger. What we did is we created a platform that allows you to protect that data and maintain your individuation. And it starts with social media and a chat application that's the world's strongest encryption. And it's called Crystal's Kyber technology and encryption, post-quantum secure. That means even quantum computers can't crack it. And it's all on blockchain. So it's decentralized. It even has a voting system. There's even ability to send money between parties, right? Or cryptocurrencies. And I'm doing a transaction right now to be able to include even Bitcoin payments between parties. This decentralization is controlled by no one. I can't control it. It's the potential for a new paradigm in a world where maybe as a humanity evolves, we don't need overlords anymore. we can realize that we're all sovereign. We don't need to report to and be controlled by these other parties. The only thing the government has brought us, let's be real, is wars and spending our resources to basically create weapons to kill our fellow human beings. It's time for us to free our voices. And we all know that 2024 is going to be a very interesting year. For those of us that are close to the veil and understanding what's coming around the corner, we all know, and I created this platform so that it could not be penetrated. It's not on Apple Store. It's also not on the Google Play, because they can shut it down if it's there and dependent on them. The same thing that happened with Parler and so many other platforms and programs, right? And I don't ascribe to either Republicans or Democrats. I just want to have a place where free speech can be protected. And it also will have the ability at the end of the summer to be able to do telephone calls and large video conferencing. You'll be able to have millions and millions. There's unlimited scale on this. So the largest group chat that you can have on WhatsApp is 1,024 people. I already have as an encrypted platform. And by the way, Telegram's not even encrypted. Everyone thinks it is, unless you actually filled in secret chat from the very first time you started chatting with somebody, which nobody does. It's not even default encrypted. Nobody knows this. I went to a Telegram chat because I thought, oh, it's encrypted. By the way, it's not. And I have tons of bots on there. Like tons and tons of bots. I just got a text right before we started this call, and someone said, is this you? And it was from a fake Robert Edward Grant. And trying to scam someone I know, which is like, come on. That was on Telegram. So on Orion, there's no bots. There's no advertisement, right? It's a subscription model, $8.88 a month. We're in beta right now, so it's free. It's growing like crazy. Just in my group chat, I've already got several thousand people. And it's phenomenal because there's so many group chats that have been formed by this conscious community of high vibrational people, because they recognize that this is going to be a platform that they can't be taken away from. They can't be shut down. I can't control it. If the government showed up to me and said, give me something, I wouldn't be able to do it, because all of your data that's on there is decentralized. And it's sharded, right? It is fragmented across the nodal network. And it's built on a Polkadot substrate that's going to become very soon a parachain. So, which is very, very decentralized. It's the best decentralization network that exists. And that's why we chose it. We chose it for that reason, because it had the very best governance. It's the same guy that founded Ethereum with Vitalik, which is a guy named Gavin Wood. And he built the very best protocol that's a true layer zero that allowed us to tear out the encryption layer and put in post-quantum secure algorithms. So that's why we built on it. And I spent 5 years building this project, and now it's like blowing up, and it's super exciting.
Yeah, I just want to, like, for people who are listening out there, just kind of like summarize what Robert just described. It's really difficult for me because to put into words the potential of why, and at the timing of why this is so damn important. It's a potential decentralized platform, which is quantumly nobody can control, where you can vote and your vote fucking counts. You know that nobody's twisting your vote, because you guys all, I mean, he who has ears, let him hear, where you can do money exchanges, where you can chat with your friends, and it's decentralized. It's a model. It's a platform with finance, communication, and all of these things are decentralized. And if you guys know how Robert started this conversation, if for those who can see behind the veil and you understand what's to come, the importance of this in humanity's history has never, ever been more important than it is right now. And this is a platform that can hold that. And, in Apple, Google Play, honestly speaking, I'm just going to be honest, they can shut you down anytime they want without any reason. So, and, understand.
This is why it's a progressive web app, and it can't be shut down, right? That's the beauty of it. It exists. It's like trying to turn off the dark web. You can't turn off the dark web. You may not like what's on the dark web, but you can't turn it off. And it's the same thing with this, and it's all on IPFS, Interplanetary File System. So this is a totally new paradigm, and we did a massive legal review on this too. I put $65 million behind this.
Damn.
So this is not a small project, and the app is excellent. People really love it. So it's an entirely new, there's no limit to the scale. I could have 1 billion people on one group chat if I wanted.
Wow. Wow. Robert, how do, at this, it's beta period, for those conscious people listening out there, how can we support this movement? Is there anything we can do at this time?
Sure. You go to orionmessenger.io, and that'll put you on the wait list. And we just added 10,000 more people to the platform, right? That'll put you on the wait list. It's a pretty large wait list right now, but we're going commercial in a few months. So I would say by June, it'll be more in the commercial phase. We're launching communities as well, which looks just like Instagram. Very similar, and so you've got a feed and everything, but it's all encrypted. And that's what's really cool about this. It's like we built it all with the foundation of chat rather than going the other way around. And it's really nice. It's like a cross between I would say WhatsApp, Telegram, and Instagram, and probably Slack. It's pretty cool. It's nice. If you've not been on it, definitely recommend. You can send me your email address, and I'll let you get in front of the line.
Cool.
That's the best I could do. That's the most control I have over this thing, is to basically allow people to get in a little bit earlier than somebody else. But I have no other control than that. Yeah. We literally created it so it can be self-sustaining and build upon itself, and it will be open source. The code and everything will be fully open source, so devs can build. I see a day when you won't be using Google Maps anymore. There'll be a map program that it will be built on top of. And a lot of these are open sourced already. So you could create one on top of our blockchain that's entirely proprietary and then have it be entirely encrypted so that your location, your geolocation can't be sold anymore because it's all encrypted. We're building a browser right now. We're building the Orion browser. And anytime you go to a website inside this browser, it's all encrypted. So even the cookies are encrypted. It can't read anything. So you're leaving no trace behind of where you've been. And I see this as, eventually you'll be able to collect all the data for yourself that you want, because you may not know this, but AbbVie, a big pharma company, pays $27,000 a year for each individual to buy their geolocation data from big tech if you're a type 2 diabetes patient. Can you believe that? Because they use it in their clinical trials as controlled study. They also want to be able to get the big data off of where you're eating, if you're on drugs or not, like Ozempic and these types of drugs. They're tracking all of that, and it's super valuable. So wait, if AbbVie is paying $27,000 a year for your geolocation data, imagine how valuable all of your data could be. Is this not then an opportunity? Energy, I know you study a lot of physics, but we could say that there is something called energy, mass, and information equivalency. And it's inherent right in the E equals mc squared. So I believe that the entire universe is built on information. And the information theory, right, is what is going to end up prevailing, because all of this, when you look at it, no matter how you transit energy or mass, it's just information, right? How you transmute it and change it is just this transference from one state to another, but it's all information.
Yeah.
So when we think of it from that perspective, right, we have to be able to protect that information. Information becomes the most valuable thing. So then if your information is that valuable, shouldn't you be able to blockchain it yourself and own it as an NFT or otherwise? And then you could decide to bucketize it. And if you ever wanted to sell it, you could, or never sell it. It's up to you. That's your data sovereignty. You don't have to worry about getting kicked off of Instagram, or, geez, we're going into something bizarre with this election this cycle. We know it's going to get bizarre. And where are we going to communicate? I've been rushing to get this thing done at scale because I know that this is going to be a bizarre year. So, and people are going to want to be able to. I mean, I got freaking shadow banned on Instagram because I used the word ISIS in describing Osiris and Isis, and they thought I was referencing ISIS-K, which was a terror group.
Oh.
So then I got shadow banned for that. And I was like worried, what happens if I get kicked off of Instagram just because I slipped and said the C word, COVID, right? It's like, what the hell? And now all that stuff, all these people that were fighting out against COVID turned out to be right. The vaccine didn't do jack. I mean, come on, guys. This is time for us to wake up. We have to accept ourselves and not be in judgment and negative and say, oh, the cabal is out to get me and all this stuff. But create your own pathway so that you could be master of your fate and captain of your soul. That's it. You don't need to sit there and negatively judge it all, because by doing so, you just create more of it. But creating the new, you will never, as Bucky Fuller says, I'm sure you know who Bucky Fuller was, right? As Bucky Fuller says, you cannot change things by fighting the old. You can only change things by building the new. And so what Orion as an application was intended and built for is for a new paradigm. You're right. Voting systems, all this stuff in there that is unfuckwithable.
Thank you. Thank you on behalf of humanity for creating this messenger. And it's just really, really, really beautifully synchronistic with every single conversation we've been having the whole time, that it's called Orion, that it's about letting go of judgment, that then it's about merging the hero and the villain, and that we all know the story of Orion from what you shared today. And now this new platform is going to end Orion's war, in a way, if you want to call it, dimensionally speaking, and create a decentralized platform where the information belongs to the individual, and we can maintain our individuality as the ego has been transcended. And we all understand we're all individual and celebrated in a decentralized platform at the perfect time in all of humanity's history, really, honestly speaking, for that to happen. And so thank you for creating that. Because I mean, I'm lost of words, actually, and I never get lost of words, really, about the importance of this platform at this particular time in human history. It's never been more important. And so that's really exciting that it's there, and it's in beta, and it's going to be released, and it has the capability to build on top of each other, to protect individuals, and literally for humanity, literally.
Can you imagine? Also, here's something cool that we're working on. Yeah. If I can just say, is that you'll be able to do live streaming to millions, if not billions, of people.
Wow.
And it'll even be able to integrate all the language stuff so that it'll do simultaneous translation. So you'll be able to speak in your voice, simultaneously translated to any language, major language in the world. All at the same time, unfiltered.
Whew. That's exciting.
It's flattening borders.
That's like the apostles at Pentecost without having to be, you know what I mean? It's like wow, that's amazing. It literally can break down language barriers, borders, wars, and just get information, like you said, the information out to everybody, and the truth of this amazing, beautiful dance, divine play that we find ourselves in. Now, Robert, I want to end with one last kind of number.
Sure. Go ahead.
Here.
Shoot.
And feel free to go ham on it, whatever comes forward for you.
Okay.
144,000.
Wow, I'm so glad you just said that, because actually that's one of the main reasons why I got the hit to do Orion app, is that this would be the meeting place for the 144,000, and by extension, the 144 million. And that the 144,000, so let's say that you're going to create, and I created this game, right? That's called Maya, which means the illusion. And Maya is, you can go inside the Great Pyramid, and it's so cool. It's so realistic. It's hyper realistic, 8K, everything. And you go in the King's Chamber, and you have to be able to find the stuff on the walls and realize where the sarcophagus has to be placed and everything. And then you get to go to the other star systems, right, that are all over the walls, because each block is a different coordinate system for each of those star systems, right?
Wow.
So you're deciphering the whole thing, and you could go in the subterranean chamber, you can go in the Queen's chamber, you can go in the King's chamber, and then you'll also be able to go into the throat chakra chamber, which was recently discovered, And you'll be able to go above that even into the other chambers, and then deep down where the knees are as well.
Wow.
On Vitruvian Man, because there are chambers there too. There are chambers at the pineal gland. There's also one at the crown. So this game is about learning how to use geometry and pattern recognition to ascend your consciousness. Sounds familiar, right? That's exactly what the pyramid is doing. Geometry is the QR code for our subconscious mind.
Wow.
It wakes us up. It's like you go to a restaurant during COVID, you put your phone over something to get the menu. That's exactly what's happening. Once you perceive this as a cube octahedron, you've just downloaded to your subconscious your next ascension codes. Whether it's a dodecahedron or a compound or a grantahedron or the new geometric forms that have been discovered. All of them come with new downloads of information of higher awareness and consciousness. The love codes, right? That's basically what's happening. So the 144,000, as I was designing this game, right now it's part of Orion too. So there's this game that I just described is going into Orion this summer, right? It's in alpha right now. It's going into beta this summer. So everyone on Orion gets to play it, and it's kick-ass. Like, if you've never been to the pyramid, this is like going to the pyramid. It's crazy. It's so cool. It's so next level. But what's super interesting about it is that as you go through this game process, you can raise your consciousness to higher levels. And so it's also just a metaphor for the experience that we have here in this world, right? What I learned was that I could max out at about 60 players. So you can have 60 players in the multiplayer game on Orion's Maya, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a mathematical limit of complexity that maxes out at 144,000. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So from a mathematical perspective, the level of complexity for technology would theoretically max out at 144,000 players. The rest could actually just be part of the game. You see what I mean? Like, you could create backdrop players and everything, or what sometimes people refer to as NPCs, non-player characters. But even in that context, the non-player characters have a purpose, they have an existence, they have a soul, and they ascend as well. They go through their cycle. This is just their first of the cycle that they're going through. But the theoretical limit was 144,000, which I found super fascinating because the complexity would be too great beyond that. Maybe what we think of as 144,000 are the outside players that come into this game that are from a different existence. And what I learned was that from the Arcturians was that Arcturians are born in the fifth dimension, and they consider themselves just future humans. They left Earth long ago. And they're looking back at us as like this time experiment in a way. We're like a biosphere for them. And basically what they explain is that they're born into the fifth dimension and they ascend into the sixth. But in order to go to the seventh dimension of experience, they have to come back to the third and fourth. You cannot get to the higher dimension if you're simply born already in the higher dimension. You have to be able to go back to lower dimension and conduct your own hero's journey, self-realize through true experience, not by didactics. And that's the only way that you can enter into the higher seventh dimension and the dimensions beyond. So we come down into this game. We come down into this reality, 144,000. And then by extension, there's like an in-between group of 144 million. The reason I built Orion was for the 144,000, 144 million to coalesce.
He who has ears, let him hear. That's all I will say, because what Robert just broke down right there. Yeah, I'm just going to say, he who has ears, let him hear. And re-listen to that last 5 minutes while you're in a meditative state.
Take a little mushrooms. And just feel into the love. It's all about the love. That's all that matters.
I love that you're bringing it back to that. That's it. Boom.
It's all about the love.
Yeah.
And every feeling, we're here to feel. We're not here to avoid our feelings. That's the whole experience. It'd be like, imagine going to Disneyland with no feelings.
Yeah.
And so that's the funny thing. Like, Arcturians will laugh at us. They laugh about our math as being very primitive. And, they're like, oh, yeah, all these people think that they're objective scientists when math is actually just as esoteric and spiritual as it is objective. It's both. Therein lies the duality. That's why we have numerology, which is like the most kind of like esoteric and mystical, but also we consider it the queen of the sciences. It's both. But math without meaning is just information. Math with the spiritual context and meaning of the square root of 3 is divine communication. So now people are falling in love with math because they're realizing it's the language of source consciousness.
Robert, if there's someone out there, I mean, a lot of what you said was you literally took the math and combined spirit into it in many ways today. But if there's someone out there who's a beginner in this, they're just listening to this, some of this stuff might be with it. Is there one book that you recommend? Hey,
sure.
This book.
Sure. So, I mean, I wrote a book called Philomath, which has done super well. It's on Amazon.
Philo?
It's philo, which means like philosophy, Philo, and math just means learning. So the ancient word for mathematics in Greek was learning. So Plato said all his number, just like Pythagoras before him. And what's interesting, I actually believe they were the same person. Plato and Pythagoras and Leonardo da Vinci, they're all the same reincarnation over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But they said, all is number, and so math is the seat of all learning. And it was Aristotle who decided to narrowly classify it as the study of quantity or the science of quantity, when actually before that it was all learning. Because I could say that applied mathematics is geometry, and applied geometry is physics, and applied physics is chemistry, and applied chemistry is biology, and applied biology is psychology, and applied psychology is sociology, and applied sociology is philosophy, and applied philosophy is mathematics. It's a circle. We only perceive it as separate disciplines. They're just different aspects. It's like looking at the separation of the zodiac and all of the mythology that goes along with those separations of zodiac. They're all just parts of the number 1, just looking at it from different degrees of perspective. And in the decan, there's 36 of them, 1 for every 10 degrees. But then you could break those into fractals, as above, so below, of smaller fractals, which then we do with time. We create the base 60 counting system, right? And it's all related to the way the one divides itself so that it could perceive itself through new eyes of perspective with each individuated unit of consciousness, which is what we are. We are all just divisions of the number 1.
Yeah. So, I just want to just kind of do a quick recap here, guys. Like, so first of all, Robert, thank you, man. Thank you for taking the time and for your hero's journey. What a journey, from IgA nephropathy to being on TV in Japan, to learning how to lean in, and to when everybody runs, leaning in, and every step that you've taken. It's like almost like you lived 100 lifetimes in this lifetime, and into the medical industry, and then into the spiritual awakening and all of the Egypt codes and understanding of math and all these different things. But I love at the very end of all of this, you bring it back to at the very end, LOVE, love. And the first step to enter the queendom of heaven is non-judgment. And you've harped on that. You've shown us multiple perspectives through math, through stars of non-judgment. And then the hero and the villain collapse into one. And we realize we are this love, and everything is a miracle. And everything becomes about learning and fulfilling the one intention of source, to expand the knowledge of the one. And then also all your hero's journey has led to the creation of this beautiful app and beautiful platform for humanity, for a meeting place for the 144,000, for the 144 million to merge and to retain their individuality, and to go down, to go up, in all those different ways. So, hey, Robert, man, thank you so much, brother.
Thank you, my friend.
I truly appreciate it, and for your hero's journey. And
You've
Yeah.
had a profound impact on my life, and I'm grateful for that. And so I'm grateful that I could spend this time with you and keep doing what you're doing. It is having a I would have never gotten that transmission that I read off here if I had not met you.
Yeah.
So, we all have a role to play in this divine play, this divine comedy, this divine tragedy, this divine love.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
when we realize our role and we find and remember who we are and the purpose that we have, our raison d'etre for being here, there's nothing more beautiful than to experience life through the eyes that we can perceive ourselves as God. Because we're all divisions of it. And there's no part of this universe that's not God. And it's all miracle and it's all divine. If we choose to see it that way, the choice is ours.
Fucking ho, brother. And we'll end it there. Thank you, brother. Appreciate your time, man. Appreciate your wisdom.
Thank you, my friend.
Yeah.
See you next time.
All right. Sounds good.